The Invisible Basilica of Sabazius. Gnostic Saints 36 through 42, including Parzival, Kamuret, Arthur, Merlin, Hippolytus, Bardesanes, Valentinus, Gnostic Saint Parsival, 6th through 7th century, era Vulgaris, mythic, by Thou Epirion, also known as Parzival, Parsifal, Parzival, and Perlesvo, and Peredur. The medieval European hero of the Grail legends, who typifies the pure fool of Acto Zero. Parsival equals 418. The various Grail legends differ in their accounts of Parsival, but usually count him as one of Arthur's Knights of the Round Table. Parsi Body means fairy. Parsi are a group of fairies. Parsival would be a group of fairy angels. The three best known works on the subject of Parsival, Pierce Valley, and the Holy Grail are the Conte del Grail, 1180, of the French clerk and Chevalier Chrétien de Troyes, circa 1140 to circa 1190, de Parzival, 1207, of the Bavarian knight and poet Wolfram von Eschenbach, circa 1170 to circa 1220, and the opera Parsifal, 1882, of Richard Wagner, QV. Crowley describes the legend of Parzival in the Book of Thoth 2:0, and in Magic in Theory and Practice. He links the story of Parzival with his VIAOV formula. A number of occult commentaries have been written on the story of Parzival, including one by C.S. Jones, Frater Ahed, titled The Chalice of Ecstasy. The following is a summary of the story of Parsifal based on Wagner's libretto. The Grail Knight Gurnes Mons. The Grail Knight Gurneymans and his esquires are praying in a forest near Mont Zelvat, the hidden temple of the Grail, somewhere in the Pyrenees Mountains between France and Spain. The disheveled Kundry runs in, bearing ointment for Ambrosius, the wounded Grail king. Ambrosius is the son of Titurel, and founder of the Order of Grail Knights and the builder of the Grail Temple. Wolfram calls these knights Templisen. Templesen. Possibly another word referencing an adopted son, which has led many to identify them as the Knights Templar, although the Templar order was not founded until 1118. Goodrich asserts that Wolfram himself was a Knight Templar. Ambrosius is borne on a litter to a nearby lake to bathe, and Gurneymans explains to his esquires that Ambrosius was wounded by the sorcerer Klingsor. Klingsor has aspired to join the Grail Knights under Titurel, but he failed the test of purity and had been turned away. He retired to a lonely valley, and in an act of penance and in hopes of being thus able to gain the Ghal, he castrated himself. He then returned to appeal again to Titural, but was scornfully repelled. Enraged, he turned to sorcery and fashioned a pleasure garden filled with seductive flower maidens, with the purpose of enticing the Ghal knights one by one, and thus to eventually take control of the Grail castle himself. When Titurel empowered his son to take charge, Amfortas set out to destroy Klingsor, but he was met by Kundry, the Ghal messenger, who distracted him with her charms. Klingsor took advantage of the situation to steal the sacred lance and turn it upon Amfortas before escaping. Gordonimans also explains that the Ghal has instructed Amfortas through a vision that only the lance which caused the wound can heal that wound, and that only the pure fool, de Rene Tor, made wise through compassion, can regain the lance and heal the wounded king. Suddenly a youth appears, in the custody of two other Ghal knights. He has been apprehended for carelessly shooting one of the sacred swans of Mont Salvat with his bow and arrow. Gurnimans reprimands and questions him. Parsival stands confounded, having acted without understanding. He tells of his vague recollection of his mother and their hut in the wilderness, and that he made the bow and arrows to shoot eagles. He remembers that he one day saw a troop of passing knights, and he left home to follow them. Gundry explains that the boy was raised a poor widow's son. His mother, Herzilede, Heart of Sorrow, had raised him alone and in secret after his father, Kamuret, had died in battle. She informs Parsifa that his mother died of a broken heart when he left her to follow the knights. Parsifa first attacks Kundry, then, stricken with guilt, collapses in a fit of trembling. Kundry retreats into the darkness and falls asleep. When Parsifa recovers, he asks Gurnimans, "Where is the Ghal?" Gurnimans, suspecting that the boy might be the pure fool, decides to take him before the Ghal. Gurnimans takes him to the rocky cliffs adjacent to the forest, where they pass through a door in the rock. Thence the high-domed Ghal temple, there to witness the feast of the Ghal. Parsival watches silently as Amfortas is brought in on his litter. Amfortas unveils the Ghal, but its sight causes his wound to reopen. Gushing blood, Amfortas raises the luminous Ghal in agony to bless the bread and wine. He collapses, and without himself partaking of the meal, he is returned to his litter and removed from the temple. On seeing the Ghal, Parsival is expected to ask the ritual question, "Whom does the Ghal serve?" But he stands mute. Gurnimans asks him why he does not speak, and whether he understands what he has seen. He silently shakes his head, and Gurnimans angrily dismisses him, calling him a mere fool. Later, the sorcerer Klingsor is seated before his magic mirror in the keep of his castle. Later, the sorcerer Klingsor is seated before the magic mirror in the keep of his castle, surrounded by the complex instruments of his sorcery. Observing the approach of Parsival, he summons Kundry and commands her to seduce Parsival. She refuses. Klingsor asserts his authority by virtue of his immunity to her charms. She mocks him, asking, "Are you chaste?" Klingsor rebukes her and points out how handsome the approaching knight is, and that he may be the one to release her from her curse. Kundry relents and leaves to accomplish the task, brooding over her corruption of Amfortas long ago. As Kundry leaves to make her preparations, Klingsor's tower slowly sinks and disappears, revealing his garden of desire, inhabited by his illusory flower maidens. Parsival finds himself in the garden surrounded by these maidens, who lament his having wounded their lovers, and attempt to entice him. Kundry appears and drives him away. She then begins to weave her erotic spell over Parsival. She tells him the story of the love of his parents, the death of his father Kamuret, how Herzliya tried to protect him from his father's fate by sheltering him from the world, and how Herzliya died of a broken heart when he left her. She offers her love to redeem him of the guilt of his mother's death and kisses him. Parsival starts up in terror. He feels the pain of the lance's wound and sees the Ral filled with blood. He comes to a realization of the nature of the wound of Amfortas and the means whereby it must be healed. He falls to his knees in prayer, pushing Kundry away. He resolves to obtain the lance and fulfill his destiny as Redeemer. Kundry recognizes this and begs him to help her find her own salvation, to which he agrees if she will guide him back to the Ral temple, but only after he has accomplished his mission. She finds this insult intolerable and calls upon Klingsor to avenge her. Klingsor appears on the castle wall and hurls the lance at Parsival. The lance speeds toward Parsival, but it miraculously comes to a halt in mid-air above him. He reaches up and takes it. He makes the sign of the cross with the lance. Klingsor's castle falls to ruins, and his magic garden withers to dust. Kundry swoons and collapses, pausing only momentarily to look back at Kundry. Parsival disappears into the wilderness. Many years later, on Good Friday, the aged Gurney Mons, now a hermit, dwelling in a hut by a sacred spring, the fountain of salvation, discovers Kundry in a stupor, lying in a thicket of brambles. He awakens her and he offers her service. She begins to fetch water from the spring, but she catches sight of a knight approaching. He is clad in black armor with the visor closed, and he bears a spear. Gurnimans reproves the stranger for bearing weapon on Good Friday. Gurnimans reproves the stranger for bearing a weapon on Good Friday. The stranger thrusts the spear upright into the ground, removes his armor, and kneels in silent prayer before the spear. Gurnimans and Kundry suddenly recognize him as Parsival, and the spear as the sacred lance. Joyous greetings are exchanged, but then Gurnimans informs Parsival that, in his absence, the suffering of Amfortas has increased terribly, and that because Amfortas no longer dared to unveil the Ral, Tituro had died and the knights had been disbanded. Bardesanes is overcome with grief over the disastrous results of his foolish wanderings and collapses. They take him to the sacred spring, where they bathe his feet and sprinkle his breast with the holy water. He revives and asks to be taken to Amfortas. Gurnimans agrees, then sprinkles his head with holy water and anoints him with oil. Gurnimans agrees, then sprinkles his head with holy water and anoints him with oil, proclaiming him the new Ral king. Parsival then turns to Kundry and sprinkles her with holy water. She weeps, and Parsival kisses her gently upon the brow. They vest him with the pure white mantle of the Grail Knights. He takes the lance, and they lead him to the Grail temple. A Grail procession forms. The remaining knights bear to Terel's coffin, followed by Amfortas on his litter. The knights implore Amfortas to unveil the Graal one last time, but he cannot. In his agony, he tears his robe, exposing his wound, and demands that the knights slay him. Solemnly, Parzival approaches Amfortas and touches the lance to his side. Immediately, the king is healed and freed from his suffering. Blood flows from the point of the lance. Parzival proceeds to the altar of the Graal and ascends. He unveils the Graal, removes it from its shrine, and kneels before it in prayer. The Graal begins to shine more brilliantly, and a beam of white light streams down upon it. A pure white dove descends the beam of light and alights upon Parzival's head. Kundry falls lifeless at his feet. Amfortas and Gurnimans kneel in homage. Parzival grasps the Graal and elevates it in blessing above the adoring knights as the chorus sings, Ruchten, Heils, Wunder, Erlösung, dem Erlöser. Highest holy wonder, the Redeemer is redeemed. References: Frater Ahed, The Chalice of Ecstasy, being a magical and Kabbalistic interpretation of the drama of Parzival, Yogi Publication Society, Chicago, 1923. Bejean, Michael, Richard Lay, and Henry Lincoln. Holy Blood, Holy Grail. Dale, New York, 1982. Bullfinch Thomas, The Age of Chivalry, 1858, reprinted by Mentor, New York, 1962. Crowley, Alistair, The Book of Thoth, 1944. Samuel Weezer, New York, 1963-74. Crowley, Alistair, Magic in Theory and Practice, 1929 and 30. In Magic, Book 4, Parts 1 through 4, edited, annotated, and introduced by Hymenaeus Beta, Samuel Weiser, York Beach, Maine, 1994. Eschenbach, Wolfram von Parzival, translated by A.T. Hatto, Penguin Books, London, 1980. Goodrich, Norma Lore, The Holy Grail, HarperCollins, New York, 1992. Matthews, John, The Grail, Quest for the Eternal, Crossroad, New York, 1981. Jories, Chrétien de Parzival, The Story of the Grail in Arthurian Romances, translated by D.D.R. Owens, Charles E. Tutchell Company, Rutland, Vermont, 1987-1991. Wagner, Richard, Parsifal, 1882, libretto in German and English, English translation by Stewart Rob G. Schirmer, New York, 1962. Waite, A.E., The Holy Grail, University Books, New Hyde Park, New York, 1961. And there, if you come to the website listed below on YouTube, you'll have the direct site to this link, Parzival, and there are 3 additional links about Parzival at the bottom. Also see this, this, and this. Original publication date 5/9/95. Originally published in Red Flame No. 2, Mystery of Mystery, a primer of Thelemic ecclesiastical Gnosticism by Tao Apirion and Helena, Berkeley, California, 1995. Terrible Goddess. And in the excitement to get to Parzival, I looked over Carolus Magnus, 742 to 1814, by Tao Apirion. My pardons. King of the Franks, founder of the Carolingian dynasty, which supplanted that of the Merovingians, and founder of the Holy Roman Empire in 800 era Vulgaris, as Charles I, also known as Charlemagne, Car de Reusse and Karl the Great. He was the grandson of Charles Martel, the Hammer, with whom he is sometimes confused. Charlemagne was a great conqueror, statesman, and legislator, a pious Christian and a patron of learning, and was one of the principal forces in the civilization of barbarian Europe. From his capital at Aix-les-Chapelles, now Aachen in western Germany, he battled the Saracens of Spain, the Saxons of Hanover and Holland, and the Huns and Slavs of the East, ultimately uniting most of Europe in a single great state loyal to the Pope. He adopted as his ensign the double-headed eagle, symbolic of the reunion of the divided Roman Empire. He established an academy to oversee the development of schools throughout Europe, but the enlightenment of Charlemagne's reign disappeared quickly after his death and the feudalism of his degenerate successors. Many romantic fables are told of Charlemagne, and his paladins are peers. His 12 most illustrious knights. The most famous of the paladins was Roland, or Orlando, favorite nephew of Charlemagne, of whom was written the Song of Roland, as well as Orlando Furioso by the Italian poet Ariosto Florismart, Orlando's friend. Rinaldo of Montalban, Orlando's cousin, Namo, Duke of Bavaria, Salomon, King of Brittany, Turpin, the Archbishop, Astolfo of England, Ogier of Denmark, Malagigi, the enchanter, and Gano of Mayence, who betrayed him. References: Benton William, publisher, Encyclopedia Britannica, 1768 to 1973. Bullfinch Thomas, The Legends of Charlemagne, 1862, reprinted by Mentor, New York, 1962. Thorpe Lewis, editor, Einhard and Notger, The Stammerer, Two Lives of Charlemagne, Penguin Books, London, 1969. Original publication date 5/9/95. Originally published in Red Flame No. 2, Mystery of Mystery, a primer of Thelemic Ecclesiastical Gnosticism by Tau Apirion and Helena, Berkeley, California, 1995. Next is Kamuret, Kamuret. 6th to 7th century, mythic, by Tau Apirion, usually spelled Gamuret or Gahmuret. This name pronounced Gamure, not Jamurat, is the early source of the familiar name Montgomery. Married into our family name. Kamuret, or Jamurat, was the father of Parsival by Queen Herzelede, sister of Ambrosius. Here there are transliterated Hebrew for Kamuret and Herzelede. I believe Kamuret is 666 and Herzelede 671. But they're transliterated into Hebrew from German. The story of Jamurat apparently originated with the Bavarian knight poet Wolfram von Eschenbach, circa 1170 to circa 1220 Era Voga, who dedicated the first 2 chapters of his romance Parzival, 1207, to Jamurat's adventures. Jamurat was the younger of 2 sons of Gandin, the king of Anjou. When the old king died, the older brother, Eos, inherited his entire kingdom. Landless, the young Murat decided to journey to the east to seek his fortune. When he reached Mesopotamia, he offered his services as a warrior to Burak, the ruler of Baghdad. He assisted the Burak to wrest the city of Nineveh from the control of the Babylonian brothers Medon and Pompeius. He then traveled around the Burak's empire, jousting in tournaments. After winning a great victory in a tournament in the kingdom of Zazamank, Jamurat acquired a miraculous helmet called the Adamant. Jamurat in Arabic means the god which is sought. Through his heroics, he, in Eos, is the god of the lady Eos, or Eros itself, love. Through his heroics, he also attracted the attention of Belacan, the dusky queen of Zazamank. They fell in love and were married. He shared with her the throne of Zazamank for a time, but peaceful court life in a foreign land was not suited to the young warrior. He grew restless, and he presently stole away from Zazamank by sea in search of adventure. He left a note to Balakane that they would soon be reunited, provided she become baptized. After he left, Balakane gave birth to Jamurat's first son, Fierfiz, the piebald, later to become the father of Prester John. Jamurat arrived in Spain and began to travel around Europe with his cousin Calet, king of Spain and Castile. While jousting in the kingdom of Valais, now in Switzerland, he learned that his brother Eos, or Galoes, had died, leaving him the kingdom of Anjou. He was now landed and thus unable to return to Zazamank and his Balakane. However, with his gallantry in tournament, he had won the heart of Herze Lode, queen of Wale. Herze Lode convinced him that he should give up the love of the unbaptized queen in her favor, and they were married. Word then reached Jamurat that his old lord, the Burak, was facing an invasion by the Babylonians. The Burak is the magical beast, something between a mule and a donkey that was winged and took Muhammad to heaven. He returned to Baghdad to assist his old friend. While fighting in the intense heat, Jamurat paused to rest, briefly removing the heavy adamant. While he rested, a treacherous enemy knight spilled billy goat's blood upon the great helmet, rendering it softer than a puffball. When he again placed it on his head and returned to battle, it was unable to protect him from a lance blow from Medon, which transfixed his head. The Burak embalmed his body and placed it in a splendid tomb, and Queen Herzelode gave birth to Parsival, while still mourning for her husband. So he is the father of Prester John and Parsival. References: Bejant, Michael, Raleigh Lay, and Henry Lincoln, Holy Blood, Holy Grail, Dale, New York, 1982, Bullfinch, Thomas, The Age of Chivalry, 1858, reprinted by Mentor, New York, 1962, Eschenbach, Wolfram von Parzival, translated by A.T. Hotto, Penguin Books, London, 1980, Goodrich, Norma Lore, The Holy Grail, HarperCollins, New York, 1992, Waite, A.E., The Holy Grail, University Books, New Hyde Park, New York, 1961. Voland, Hermann, J., Courtly Love in Arthurian France and Germany, AMS Press, New York, 1966. Original publication date 5/9/95. Originally published in Red Flame No. 2. Mystery of Mystery, a primer of Thelemic ecclesiastical Gnosticism by Tao Apirion and Helena, Berkeley, California, 1995. Now our next saint upon the transition of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, Duchess of Edinburgh, to Queen Mother, her son, now called Prince Charles, will be King Arthur II. The saint who is next is Arthur, circa 475 to 542, Ere Vulgaris. Semi-legendary Romano-British king, son of Uther Pendragon, leader of the Knights of the Round Table. His Highness Arthur was the principal figure in a large number of medieval legends. Histories and romances, including the Welsh God Odin, which is very reminiscent of the Thousand Nights and One Nights, Aladdin, if it were called that. The Historia Brittonum of Ninnius, circa 800 EV. Once again, Arthur was the principal figure of a large number of medieval legends, histories, and romances, including the Welsh poem Gododin, circa 600 EV, the Historia Brittonum of Ninnius, circa 800 EV, and the Annals Cambriae, circa 900 EV. The Historia Regum Britanniae of Geoffrey of Monmouth, 1137 EV, Le Roman de Brut of Wasse, 1155 EV, the 12th century romances of Christian de Troyes, and the poem Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. These culminated in the epic poem Le Morte de Arthur of Sir Thomas Malory, 1469, which is included in section 2 of the AA reading list for those who are bringing themselves into enlightenment. The AA reading list is there for you to see, to learn all that you can learn, and to bring you into personal enlightenment, which is possible. These culminated in the epic poem Le Morte de Arthur of Sir Thomas Malory, 1469, which is included in section 2 of the AA reading list, and which inspired most of the later works dealing with Arthur and his court at Camelot. The AA reading list is also very helpful for those considering Freemasonry. According to the legend, Arthur was a bastard son of King Uther Pendragon and Igraine. Alain would be the name, and was brought up as a page in Uther's court under the tutelage of Merlin, QV. After having passed the test of removing the sword Excalibur from the stone in which it had been embedded, he assumed the throne of Britain and established his court at Camelot, or Caerleon. the place of the true lion, or lion's court. The adventures of his knights of the Round Table, Lancelot, Galahad, Parzival, or Parzival, QV, Bors, Gawain, Gareth, Kay, Bedivere, and Tristram form an important part of European mythology, and those of Galahad, Parzival, and Bors are centered around the quest for the Holy Grail. Arthur was a just king, beloved by his subjects, but his rule was marred by the attacks of his sister, Morgan le Fay, Morg le Fay, and ultimately by the treachery of the three people closest to him, his queen, Guinevere, his best friend, Lancelot, and his nephew, Modred, or Mordred, the Red Death. He was mortally wounded in battle with Mordred at Camlan and was taken to the mythical island of Avalon, possibly the Isle of Man, possibly off the coast of California, there to be buried, or as some say, healed. References: Bullfinch, Thomas, some would also say regenerated. Bullfinch, Thomas, The Age of Chivalry, 1858, reprinted by Mentor, New York, 1962. Goodrich, Norma Lohr, King Arthur, Harper and Row, New York, 1986. Goodrich, Norma Lohr, The Holy Grail, Harper Collins, New York, 1992. Mallory, Sir Thomas, Le Morte Author, edited by Janet Cowan, Penguin Books, London, 1969 to 1986. Original publication date 5/9/95. Originally published in Red Flame No. 2, Mystery of Mystery, a primer of Thelemic ecclesiastical Gnosticism by Tal Aperion and Helena, Berkeley, California, 1995. Following Arthur is his teacher and subject and very close companion, Merlin. Merlin Ambrosius, circa 450 to 536, era Vulgaris. This is after the Council of Nicaea, but before the advent of even the birth of the Prophet Muhammad, just before. By Tal Aperion, semi-legendary British magician, prophet, and mentor of King Arthur and the Lady of the Lake. In Sufi tradition learned by the Knights Templar, in the book called Bezels of Wisdom, or Fusus al-Hikam, a version of it has been rendered by the reader, Christopher Neal, at wonderfulstrange.wordpress.com. If you look at entry number 26, Khalid, or the Chaldean, there is a story of a man, Khalid, who lived between the time of Jesus and Muhammad, and who did not manifest his prophecy in the way that was expected. This Merlin is a possibility of him. Also, Iamblichus of Tyana is another. Once again, Merlin Ambrosius, circa 450 to 536, Anno Domini, by Tal Aperion, semi-legendary British magician, prophet, and mentor of King Arthur and the Lady of the Lake. He probably represents the fusion of several historical and mythological figures. According to legend, Merlin was the son of a mortal maiden and the devil. A variant spelling of Merlin is Melin, Melin. Hence, Abra Melin, Crowley's speculation. Abra, Chod, Abra, can mean Ab-Ra, O Father of Ra, serve or protect the Father of Ra. So, O God of gods, protect the Pharaoh of the people, or the father of the next king, and which would then mean you would need to be anointed with Abra Melin. So a variant spelling of Merlin is Milan, or Milan, hence Abra Milan. Crowley speculation. Merlin, or Milan, was responsible for Ute Pendragon's decision to establish the Round Table, and Milan devised the test of the sword and the stone for determining the true heir to the British throne. He fell victim to the wiles of the Lady of the Lake, Vivian, or Ninian. Marian, who using magic he had taught her, imprisoned him forever in a cave, or as some say, in an enchanted thorn bush. References: Bullfinch Thomas, The Age of Chivalry, 1858, reprinted by Mentor, New York, 1962. Goodrich, Norma Lore, Merlin, Harper and Rowe, New York, 1988. Mallory, Sir Thomas, Le Mort des Auteurs, edited by Janet Cowan, Penguin Books, London, 1969 to 1986. Original publication date 5/9/95. Originally published in Red Flame number 2, Mystery of Mystery, a primer of Thelemic ecclesiastical Gnosticism by Tao Apirion and Helena, Berkeley, California, 1995, EV. Our next saint is Hippolytus. Hippolytus of Rome, 170 to 235 EV, by Tao Apirion. Greek ecclesiastical writer, Bishop of Portus and first antipope, he was an Orthodox father of the Christian Church, a Roman Catholic saint, and a disciple of Irenaeus, author of a large body of early ecclesiastical writings, among which is the famous apostolic tradition, which was highly influential on the developing liturgy of the Roman Church, and a 10-volume series, Elencos, or Refutatio Omnium Heresium, Refutation of All Heresies. This work was intended primarily as a polemic against the Gnostic and other heresies. It includes relatively accurate and detailed descriptions of a number of Gnostic systems. What makes Hippolytus unique, however, among the early anti-Gnostic writers is that he quotes extensively from the condemned writings of the heretics in framing his arguments against them. Since those writings have been systematically sought out and burned by the builders of the hierarchical Christian Church, Hippolytus has provided us with a rare glimpse at the actual writings of some of the most prominent Gnostics, particularly Simon Magus and Basilides. You can see the entries for Simon Magus, Basilides, and Valentinius here on the site. The first book of the Refutatio, known as Philosophiina, or Philosophical Teachings, has been known since the Middle Ages, and a manuscript containing books 4 through 10 was discovered in 1842. Books 2 and 3 remain lost. If you happen to have them, let us know. Hippolytus is also remembered as a leader of the opposition against the corruption, viciousness, and doctrinal wanderings of the early bishops of Rome, who were later to be renamed popes due to the strength of his opposition against Pope Callistus I, 217 to 222, before the Council of Nicaea and the Hippocratic Oath. Hippolytus was elected as a schismatic bishop of Rome, antipope, by a circle of his followers. He and his group remained in schism through the terms of Pope Urban I, 223 to 230, and Pontianus, 230 to 235. He and Pontianus were both exiled to Sardinia by the Emperor Maximinus Thrax, 235 to 238, where Hippolytus and Pontianus achieved a reconciliation. Both agreed to resign their positions to make way for Pope Anterus, 235 to 236, before they died in exile. There is a statue in the Vatican Library, see above, that bears a 16th century plaque identifying it as a statue of Hippolytus, but its actual identification with Hippolytus has been questioned. References: MacDonald William, Editor-in-Chief, New Catholic Encyclopedia, McGraw-Hill, New York, 1967, Mead, GRS, Fragments of a Faith Forgotten, 1900, University Books, New York, Jackson, Samuel McCulley, Editor-in-Chief, The New Chef Herzog, Encyclopedia of Religious Knowledge, Baker Book House, Grand Rapids, Michigan, 1953. Lit. Shed, Lefferts A., Editor-in-Chief, The 20th Century Encyclopedia of Religious Knowledge, an extension of the New Chef Herzog Encyclopedia of Religious Knowledge, Baker Book House, Grand Rapids, Michigan, 1955. Rudolph Kurt, Gnosis, Harper and Row, San Francisco, 1977. The refutation of all heresies may be found here. Unfortunately, the link at ccel.wheaton.edu is no longer there, so if you go to your Google machine and type in Refutation of All Heresies Archive, you'll see the very first entry in 0.41 seconds. I received 3.26 million results. Philosophumena, or the Refutation of All Heresies, is available in multiple formats to download or read online. They just ask, if you can, to chip in. Original publication date 1995. Update 8/24/99. Originally published in Red Flame No. 2, Mystery of Mystery, a primer of Thelemic Ecclesiastical Gnosticism by Tau Epirion and Helena, Berkeley, California, 1995, Era Vulgaris. Last in this series of saints is Bardesanes, 155 to 233 EV by Tau Epirion, also known as Bardesanes, a Gnostic Christian poet from the Syrian city of Edessa, now called Urfa or Sanliurfa in southern Turkey, possibly of the Valentinian lineage. Some scholars refer to him as the last of the Gnostics, because he may have been the last major teacher to attempt to disseminate Gnosticism within the ordinary Christian community. Other scholars doubt whether he was a Gnostic at all. Certainly, Bardesanes was instrumental in the introduction of Christianity into the region of Edessa, and was considered heretical by the Christians who came after him. Bardesanes was born in Edessa to Persian parents and obtained an excellent Persian Greek education at the court of Edessa. He was also tutored by a priest of the Syrian goddess Atergatis, and became familiar with the various religious traditions of the Middle East and of India. When 25 years old, he heard the preaching of the bishop Hystapes and converted to Christianity, Hystapes. He soon converted his friend King Abgar IX of Edessa, 179 to 216, who established Bardesanean Christianity as the Edessan state religion. When Edessa was conquered by the Roman Emperor Caracalla in 216, Bardesanes fled to Armenia, where he continued his teachings. As with most early heretics, most of what we know of the doctrines of Bardesanes comes from the writings of his enemies, notably Ephraim Cyrus of Edessa. Bardesanes wrote 150 hymns in Syriac, Aramaic. Only a few scraps of the words of these hymns survive, but Ephraim plagiarized the music of Bardesanes for his own hymns, thankfully. One extant are Cosidas. One extant book, the Dialogue Concerning Fate, or the Book of the Laws of Countries, was written by one of his disciples and purported to expound Bardesanes' doctrines regarding free will, fortune, and fate. According to what can be reconstructed of the teachings of Bardesanes, his system shows considerable influence from Gnosticism, including Hermeticism, and from Chaldean mythology and astrology. He believed in a divine mother as well as a divine father. His cosmology was based on a primal dualism of God and darkness, with the four elements, water, air, fire, and light, suspended between them. The genesis of the world occurred when these elements, through a breach of the original order, became mingled with darkness. Salvation was accomplished by the gnosis of Christ. His Christ was docetic, a pure spirit in the apparent form of a man, monophysite, which separated the pure elements once again from the darkness, and allowed them to rise with the assistance of the Holy Spirit into the bridal chamber, the womb. The Bardesanes, the separation of the soul from the body, was a blessing. To Bardesanes, the separation of the soul from the body was a blessing, even in articulating one against the other. And the doctrine of the resurrection of the flesh was an absurd blasphemy. According to the Sufis, who are Gnostics, God does not create the same material twice, though he may create its form, since we are made in his form. Most modern scholars have abandoned the theory that Bardesanes was the author of that masterpiece of religious poetry, the Hymn of the Pearl, also known as the Hymn of the Soul, or the Hymn of the Robe of Glory, which was included in the apocryphal Acts of Judas Thomas. However, G.R.S. Mead was a strong advocate of the theory that he was its author, and Mead was Crowley's primary source on Gnosticism. Regardless of its authorship, the Hymn of the Pearl contains some exceptionally lucid Gnostic allegory. The hymn tells the story of a prince who, as a child, enjoyed the wealth and glories of his royal home in the East. His parents, the King of Kings and the Queen of the East, then sent him on a journey to Egypt, divesting him of his robe of glory and his purple mantle, and loading him with provisions. They promised him that if he would bring to them from Egypt the pearl that lies in the sea, hard by the loud-breathing serpent, that he would again wear his robe of glory and the purple mantle, and would be heir to their kingdom. He sent forth on his mission, traveling down through the series of foreign lands ruled by tyrants, finally arriving in the land of Egypt. He encamped next to the lodging of the serpent and assumed the garb of the Egyptians as a disguise. For some, the serpent is the Nile or Nile River. It moves from south toward the north by a almost constant undulation of its lower, of its base, of its bed, and the undulation moves upward. Whether it's tectonic or otherwise, it is why the Nile or Bahr Nil is called the serpent. He encamped next to the lodging of the serpent and assumed the garb of the Egyptians as a disguise. He encountered a fellow countryman who warned him against the trickery of the Egyptians. Nevertheless, the Egyptians gradually gained his confidence and gave him of their food to eat. Immediately upon eating the food of the Egyptians, he fell into a waking sleep, forgetting his royal origins and his mission, and became a slave to the Egyptian king. His parents perceived his trouble and sent him a magical letter to remind him of his origin and his task, and of his glorious robe. The letter flew to him like an eagle. It alit beside him and spoke to him its message. Recovering his memory, he succeeded in charming the serpent to sleep by repeating to it the names of his royal family. Ya Allahu, Ya Alihu, Ya Azimu, Ya Alimu, Ya Alim, Anta Rabbi wa Almuka Hasbi, wa Na'mu Rabbu Rabbi wa Na'mu Hasbu Hasbi. And while it slept, he snatched away the pearl. Immediately, he turned to the house of his parents, leaving the filthy garments of the Egyptians behind him. The letter which he had received from his parents flew before him, guiding his way home through the foreign lands. Upon seeing his approach, his parents sent messengers to welcome him home, and to clothe him in his glorious robe of many colors, embroidered with the image of his father and bespangled with jewels, with its purple mantle to cover it. The robe itself seemed to call out to him, and he took it joyously and wrapped it around himself. He then ascended to the gate of the city, where he greeted his fellow princes, and soon proceeded to the chamber of his father, there to be received by him, to do him proper homage, and to present him with the pearl. This Gnostic hymn appeared later, significantly modified, as a Sufi teaching story titled The King's Son, attributed to Amir Sultan, Sheikh of Bukhara, radiallahu anhu wa ankum amin, who taught in Istanbul and died in 1429, era Vulgaris. References: Mead, G.R.S., Fragments of a Faith Forgotten, 1900, University Books, New York. Mead, G.R.S., The Hymn of the Robe of Glory, The Complete Echoes from the Gnosis, Cothonius Books, Hastings, 1987. Jackson Samuel McCullough, Editor-in-Chief, The New Chef Herzog Encyclopedia of Religious Knowledge, Baker Book House, Grand Rapids, Michigan, 1953. Letcher Lefferts A., Editor-in-Chief, The 20th Century Encyclopedia of Religious Knowledge, an extension of the New Chef Herzog Encyclopedia of Religious Knowledge, Baker Book House, Grand Rapids, Michigan, 1955, Rudolph Kurt Gnosis, Harper and Row, San Francisco, 1977, Shaw Idris, Tales of the Dervishes, Dutton, New York, 1970. If the currently average reader is listening and wondering why I gush or say other words, there are people listening either from the lines of these gnosis or the family members of these people, including myself. So there's a bit extra added. Original publication date, you can go to sabazius.oto-usa.org if you would like them plain. Original publication date 5/9/95. Originally published in Red Flame number 2. If you go to Amazon, you can find it. It's called Mystery of Mystery, a primer of Thelemic ecclesiastical Gnosticism by Tau, T-A-U, Apirion, A-P-I-R-Y-O-N, and Helena, Berkeley, California, 1995. End of this series of saints. However, the Litany of the Sea that I began reading in Arabic, with some mistakes, is read every day. Still, it was published, at least, in the year 1200 or so by a man named Imam Abu Hassan al-Shadili. And not too long before that was published the Fusus al-Hikam, or the Pearls of Wisdom, which seem to all correspond to this here. So this tradition of calming the sea to extract pearls is ongoing. And right now, Ethiopia, Old Abyssinia, has built a dam that will also calm the river Nile for some time as well. Egypt is building a dam lower in Tanzania and places like that. So, but again, maybe it calms the fracture of the continent, slowing down the tectonic movements. Gnosticism is about science, but we retain... people get very bored when you speak about science exactly. So the stories that we have here are helpful in helping us remember why things are happening now. Editorial note by Christopher Neal, Frater Loki.